They hid the Matrix origin in ancient Egypt. You won't believe the lie. The great city of Kemet was a place of perfect smiles and sunshine. But it was a trick. The mighty Pharaoh wanted everyone to think he was a god. He didn't want the people to know anything. So he secretly closed all the schools and hid all the books, locking their minds in a beautiful, safe prison. What they didn't know, they didn't worry about. In this perfect-looking world lived a boy named Kale. When Kale was only 9 years old, a terrible shadow fell over his family. His father, a good and noble man who always spoke up for what was right, was suddenly taken away. The Pharaoh's guards called him a traitor and murdered him. Then, the Pharaoh, who was selfish and greedy, took every coin and every beautiful thing the family owned. Kale's heart broke, but he didn't fully understand why. Kale's mother, Nefret, was left with nothing. To raise her son, she had to struggle fiercely, like a tiny boat fighting a big storm. She worked long, tiring hours as a domestic servant for a wealthy, cold nobleman in the city. When she wasn't scrubbing floors, she was in the market, selling simple goods grown by her own family. But Nefret was a genius at hiding her pain. She was like a strong wall built of humor and faith. She never let Kale see her exhaustion, the ache in her feet, or the worry in her heart. She laughed a little too loudly and told Kale wonderful stories about his father, stories of bravery, honesty, and standing up for the truth. She absorbed all the sadness and doubt, so Kale only felt her love and confidence. She raised him to be a boy who was utterly sure of himself and believed in doing what was right, just like his heroic, remembered father. Kale grew up, an obedient and confident boy who believed everything was fine because his mother always seemed to provide. Nefret taught him how to read the few secret scrolls she had, a precious gift in a city where reading was forbidden. He promised himself he would be a man his father would be proud of, and like his father, he stood up for anyone being treated unfairly. By age 18, Kale was strong enough to get minor jobs, using his small earnings to help his mother. "Don't worry, mother," he'd always say, his voice full of youthful promise. "Everything will be fine." But then, when Kale turned 19, the beautiful lie his mother had built for him shattered. One night, Kale came home and found Nefret not laughing, not smiling, but slumped by the fire, sound asleep from pure exhaustion. The oil lamp flickered across her face, and for the first time, Kale truly saw her. He saw the deep lines of silent pain carved around her eyes, the thinness of her clothes, the cuts and calluses on her hands. It was the face of a woman who had fought a secret war for 10 years. He realized their unfortunate life wasn't just bad luck, it was a constant, brutal, hidden struggle. The perfect world his mother showed him was the most heartbreaking lie of all. His youthful promise felt hollow. Kale knew he had to do more. Like all young men in Kemet, he was required to work on the great construction projects, the pyramids. The magnificent pyramids, which the people thought were monuments to their gods, were actually the central instrument of the pharaoh's illusion. Kale became a stonemason. He was good at his job, his strong hands shaping the stone that was, ironically, building the very prison of his people. Every blow of his hammer became a quiet act of defiance against the system that had stolen his father and broken his mother. One day, deep inside the massive, echoing stone maze of the pyramid, Kale was working on a repair. He noticed a section of wall that rang hollow when struck, a slight, almost invisible seam. Driven by a decade of unanswered questions about his father's death, Kale spent nights secretly chipping away. He found it, a hidden, forgotten library, the pharaoh's personal vault of forbidden knowledge. Inside, under layers of dust, Kale found the truth, documents, diagrams, and historical records that profiled the pharaoh, not as a god, but as a brilliant, manipulative man. He found evidence of how the pharaoh orchestrated their reality, making the people live in absolute ignorance, forgetting their true potential so they would never question his power. It was the horrifying blueprint of the Matrix. Kale had the scroll of truth and the evidence of the pharaoh's treachery, but he didn't run straight to the top of the pyramid. He was smart enough to know that exposing the lie was more complicated than just shouting. For weeks and days, Kale risked everything, sneaking back into the hidden library. He spent hours reading the secret texts, his young mind devouring the forbidden knowledge. He learned that the pharaoh had captured and silenced many who knew the truth, but one name kept reappearing in the margins of the oldest texts. A high priest who had refused to bow and was not under the pharaoh's mind cage. Kale knew he needed help. He used the secret codes and maps he found to trace the priest to his hiding spot, a dark, forgotten tomb deep in the desert wastes outside Kemet. Kale found the priest, a very old man named Ammonius, whose eyes were clear and sharp, unlike the dull, contented eyes of the citizens. Ammonius listened to Kale's whole story, the father's murder, the mother's pain, the stonemason's discovery. Ammonius was deeply impressed by Kale's journey. He smiled, a small, knowing smile, and said, "The kingdom has been under the shadow of the pharaoh for generations, and all were blind. But you are different." He told Kale everything. How the pharaoh had built the illusion using Heka, the ancient, powerful divine code. How the pyramid was the central machine. And most importantly, how to use the scroll of unmaking Kale possessed. He gave Kale the key and the exact steps he had to take to liberate the people, warning him that the scroll was ancient and sacred. Ammonius placed his hand on Kale's shoulder and looked him in the eye, his voice grave. "You are the chosen one, Kale. But know this, fail the mission, and the pharaoh will destroy the scroll, and the kingdom will be doomed forever. Your life is not only at stake, it is forfeit." But Kale, remembering his father's promise and the silent pain in his mother's eyes, didn't hesitate. He chose to try, rather than bury the truth. Kale turned and began his ascent toward the heart of the pyramid, the sacred scroll of unmaking hidden close to his heart. The fear of death was real, but the memory of his mother's tired, sleeping face was the fire that pushed him forward. He was going to awaken the world. He succeeded. The people were free. But then, Kale's greatest nightmare truly began. After Kale, the awakener, used the scroll to shatter the lie, the entire kingdom was chaos, and the pharaoh was furious. He declared Kale wanted, dead or alive, but only if he had the powerful scroll of unmaking with him. Kale had worked on the Great Pyramid for years and knew its stone heart better than anyone. He had planned his escape long ago. As the pharaoh's fierce special soldiers surrounded the pyramid, Kale didn't try to leave the structure. Instead, he used his knowledge of the tunnels to sneak into a secret, enclosed passage where he knew the soldiers wouldn't find him. His first and most important job was protecting the knowledge. Deep inside his secret tunnel, Kale dug a small hole and buried the scroll of unmaking. He covered the spot perfectly, making sure the pharaoh's greedy hands would never touch it. For a day and a night, Kale waited in the dark, listening to the shouts of the soldiers. Finally, he found a hidden route and snuck into the city streets of Kemet. The people were awake now, buzzing with shock, confusion, and a new sense of freedom. They had heard of the brave stonemason who had awakened them. Some were confused, but many saw him as a hero. Kale knew going home was a death sentence, as the soldiers would be waiting. His only thought was to escape Kemet entirely. The whole city was crawling with the pharaoh's soldiers, desperately hunting him. But the good of the people was stronger than the pharaoh's fear. One man, a kind, brave citizen named Nacht, decided to help. He saw Kale not as a fugitive, but as the man who had given him his life back. Nacht took Kale into his home, hiding him from the constant house-to-house searches by the pharaoh's men. Even with the city turned upside down, the pharaoh couldn't find Kale. The pharaoh was convinced Kale was still hiding. In a desperate move, he placed a massive bounty on Kale's head, a tempting promise of gold and silver for anyone who betrayed him. Kale and Nacht worked out a plan. Kale would hide inside a cart, disguised as simple farm produce. They would cover him with heavy sacks of grain and grass to look like they were just transporting supplies out of the city gates, where a mandatory search would take place. On the day of the escape, Kale was squeezed tight inside a sack, covered in grains. He could barely breathe, suffocating slightly, but he was filled with hope. The cart rattled and stopped. Kale thought, "I'm free." But when the cart was uncovered, Kale realized the unthinkable had happened. He wasn't at the city gates. He was in the pharaoh's palace courtyard. Nacht, the man Kale had trusted, had betrayed him for the pharaoh's gold. Kale's heart was crushed. He wept, his betrayal hurting more than any pain the pharaoh could inflict. The hero who awakened his people was betrayed by one of them. A cruel, painful irony. The pharaoh was furious that Kale didn't have the scroll. Kale was chained, beaten mercilessly, and locked in the deepest dungeon. The only thing the pharaoh wanted was the Scroll of Unmaking, and Kale refused to give it up. Day after day, the torture worsened, but the memory of his promise kept Kale strong. Then, the pharaoh used his ultimate weapon. He brought Kale's dear mother, Nefret, before him. He gave Kale a terrible choice: his mother's life or the scroll. Kale couldn't bear to let the woman who had sacrificed everything for him be harmed. Though he knew he wouldn't make it out alive, he agreed to give up the scroll, pleading for his mother's life to be spared. They went to the pyramid. Kale pointed to the hidden spot and uncovered the ground. But when he dug, the spot was empty. The scroll had vanished. The earth looked untouched, as if nothing had ever been buried there. Kale was utterly confused. The pharaoh, believing Kale was mocking him, raged. He brought Kale and Nefret back to the courtyard. And right before Kale's eyes, the innocent woman, the source of his courage, was murdered by the pharaoh's hand. Kale's scream was swallowed by the stone walls. Broken, he wished for death, but the pharaoh refused to grant it, demanding the scroll. The beatings and tortures continued, hour after hour, until Kale felt no more pain. Every day, they forced him to search the pyramid, but the scroll was never found. Kale was a shell of a man. Then, one dark night, after a terrible beating, Kale fell into a deep sleep. A gentle light filled his dream, and the spirit of his ancestral gods appeared. The spirit smiled and said, "You have been chosen to be the protector of the sacred scroll of power. We will get you out." Kale woke up. Strangely, the guards, who never slept, were all slumped over, fast asleep. Following the precise escape route shown in his dream, Kale easily slipped out of the prison. He followed the ancestral instruction to the next town, but the spirit had one final order: go back to your old house and look under your bed. Kale followed the path and snuck into his old, empty home. Under the simple bed where he grew up, he found it. The Scroll of Unmaking had reappeared, safe and sound. He took the scroll and vanished into the night. For 2 years, the pharaoh searched, but Kale was gone. Kale, however, was not idle. Using his invisible presence, he quietly built a powerful rebel group against the pharaoh, fueled by his story and courage. His movement grew so strong that the pharaoh realized too late that nearly half the kingdom had joined the powerful, invisible force led by Kale. War broke out in Kemet. Kale's forces fought with a righteous fury, backed by the certainty of their cause. They were unstoppable. Kale himself faced the pharaoh in a final duel. Driven by the memory of his mother's sacrifice and his father's justice, Kale personally drove a sword into the heart of the pharaoh, avenging his family and his people. With the tyrant overthrown, the people of Kemet, truly awake and free, did something unprecedented. They chose their own leader. A new pharaoh was appointed by the will of the people, the first democratic choice in their history. Kale was hailed as a living legend and honored for his bravery. He was offered the highest position, the right hand of the new pharaoh, but Kale honorably declined. He had a greater promise to keep: his vow to the gods to protect the sacred scroll of power. The new pharaoh built a beautiful temple in his honor, ensuring Kale's legacy and legend would be passed down through generations. Libraries and schools were brought back. The people of Kemet prospered in peace, inspired by Kale's story to always stand for what is right. And so was born the legend of Kale, the awakener. And so, Kale's story became the legend of the free world. The man who rose from the ashes of betrayal and sorrow had fulfilled his promise, avenging his family and securing freedom for his people. The kingdom of Kemet was finally unwritten, its future placed back into the hands of a people who were, at last, truly awake. The war was over, but the Matrix was not forgotten. Kale declined the crown, choosing to be the guardian of the sacred scroll, the powerful knowledge that first shattered the illusion. But how did he find that scroll? How did he even know the pharaoh's world was a lie? If you missed the moment it all began, you have to go and check out our last video where it all began, the real Matrix origin. Ancient legend behind the movie, the chilling discovery in the pyramid, the desperate meeting with the ancient priest, and the precise, terrifying moment the pharaoh's gilded lie was activated. You have to go back to the beginning. The video is on the end screen. Click to watch the video, and do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Untold story. Thank you for watching.